Welcome to another CO2 Monday in the Refrigeration Mentor podcast. I am your host, Trevor Matthews. And I want to thank all of you once again for taking the time to come each Monday to the CO2 Mondays and hang out, meet new guests, meet new people, learn new things. That's what it's all about, investing a little bit of your time each week to grow your knowledge. This week, I have some special guests that I actually met in Germany at Chilventa. And this is why I talk about going to networking events, going to events to meet new people, because you never know who you're going to meet, the type of relationships you're going to build and grow your network. Today, I have Danielle Wright, the executive director, and Morgan Smith, the program communications director from North American Sustainable Refrigeration Council. Welcome, ladies. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
so
thanks so much,
much.
Trevor.
I appreciate it. Daniel, why don't we just start it off and do an introduction of yourself and your role with your organization?
Yeah, so I came over to the North American Sustainable Refrigeration Council, NASRC, they like to
That's a
say.
mouthful.
I know. Don't feel bad if you don't get it in the right order. It's just the intent that matters.
Yeah.
And I came over from the energy efficiency space. So I used to work with grocery stores and help them, reduce their energy and, get utility rebates and help assess the payback of those efficiency measures. So it was mostly to do with the refrigeration side. And in all the years working with grocery stores on energy efficiency and something that's good for the environment and good for their bottom line, I never thought about the refrigerant and the impact of the refrigerant. And I heard about R22 getting out of that, and I thought we'd kind of solve the problem and there wasn't an issue with refrigerants. And come to find out that all that work that folks did to get out of those ozone depleting refrigerants, now they're in high global warming potential refrigerants. And so as regulations started to kick in around the world, the group that got together and formed this organization, they were from the supermarket community. They saw the writing on the wall. They knew that we needed more options, and in particular, climate friendly options. So the original refrigerants, CO2, ammonia, propane, but that there was unique barriers in the US marketplace. And a lot of these folks work for, large companies. They could see that they were making progress in Europe under the F-gas regulations. Canada, I think there was a incentive program in the Quebec region at the time, and elsewhere in Asia. But the US market really wasn't budging at the time. And so this group got together to form the organization to address the specific market barriers that were being experienced in North America and the United States in particular. And so some of those barriers, there's some codes and standards issues at the time that we've overcome. There's, looking at policy, there's the return on investment. Contractor training, technician training was a big one, right? Looking at what types of funding or incentives could help to offset the cost, energy performance, kind of best practices in general. And that really they needed to bring all the stakeholders to the table to address these issues. And that's what they did. So the organization now, we have retailers representing over 51,000 US locations. We have the equipment manufacturers, the service contractors, consultants, engineering design, really anybody that needs to work on this problem together to make naturals a viable option in the United States.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because it's really important. It's all of us. We all need to work together at this because this is a big challenge and there's a lot of different areas. So it's going to be a lot different. Morgan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Morgan Smith. I'm the Program and Communications Director here. I actually come from a very different space. So I have a background in sustainability. And prior to this, I was actually working in forestry. But I've always had a very strong interest in work that helps align the goals of businesses and individuals with, environmental wins. So a friend of mine sent me actually a link to the NASRC website and said, this sounds so up your alley. And so that was how I got sucked into the world of refrigerants, learning the incredible impact that it has as a climate solution, of course, but also the incredible opportunity to align those goals, make some wins on the business side as well, and the great work that NASRC was doing with such a strong network of industry stakeholders. And so joined the refrigeration world and have never looked back.
I love that. I love that because this is very important, and a lot of people don't know about it. Like you, before you got into it, like what is a refrigerant? You know what I mean? I bet. But then as you start to learn about it, it's like it does impact everybody's life on the planet. And I know you guys work real closely with retailers, right, on these regulations and rules because they continue to change and they evolve. And this is who you work for a lot of time is with the retailers. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we work with all the stakeholders, but at the end of the day, it's the retailers that need to make the decision, right? And they bear the burden, they bear the cost burden a lot of times, right, of making the switch. And they have to replace equipment in order to get to using natural refrigerants. It's a really big investment. And so I would say, one of the driving forces is absolutely regulations. And I would say what the role we play there is more like a translator, because, when we work with, let's say it's a state entity, like we've done some work in California with the Air Resources Board, we really try to get at, what's their ultimate goal, right? And how are they measuring that? And what are some of the metrics that they need to hit? And then we kind of work backwards from that and say, okay, here's where retailers are. And so how can we align their business model with your goals, right? And so how can we make those two things come together? Because from the policy space, they don't understand that like a retailer is not thinking about their refrigerant, they're thinking about selling food. I mean, the purpose of the business, right, they're not in the business of just like running refrigeration systems. They're doing that as an end to, or a means to an end of keeping food cold and selling it, which is an essential function. Like you pointed out, the cold chain affects everything, right? And so they don't think about that. And so getting them to get in the mind space of a retailer and how they're thinking about planning out their capital projects and the fact that they don't ever replace the system all at once, these kind of core fundamentals, we try to educate and help the policymakers and regulators understand and get the conversation going between the two parties so that we can come up with some creative solutions. And that's exactly what we did in California. We started from a place where the regulation that was proposed was completely unachievable. And we were able to find a middle ground that, the retailers could agree on that also met the goals of the policymakers.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So there has to be a lot of challenges with this, because there's a lot of diversity globally. There's lots going on, you know what I mean? And you guys just strictly do North America. Is that correct? Or the US? Is it North America you guys take care of? Or you try to?
What we found is that the bulk of the problem is in the US. Oftentimes we're referencing things that went well in Canada, and then Mexico has slightly different needs and the type of equipment that they're looking at. It's in a different place. I would say maybe a way to phrase it is the US has the biggest opportunity. We estimate right now that about 2% of the systems in the United States are using HFC-free or natural refrigerant solutions. And so that's, 98% opportunity there.
Yeah. And I think that's the big thing. That's one of our big challenges. And a challenge for me too, that I work with contractors is like, how do we do a better job at not having leaks in systems? I think that's one of the biggest issues, why we do all of this stuff. And some of it can be through quality of works, through education. But I really think we need to work together, all sides in the refrigeration industry to make a bigger impact. Morgan, what have you noticed some of the biggest challenges right now with with the retailers and the regulations for you?
Yeah, so I think actually I like to look at the policy side as a little bit of an opportunity because I think, as Danielle said, our role is primarily around education. And so the regulations alone, of course, present a very large challenge for the retailers. There's so many barriers and hurdles that they face. There's supply chain issues. We have to make sure the service workforce is up and ready to go for this, as Danielle mentioned. So another key role that I think is really important to highlight here is the role that policy can play to support those changes. So looking at ways that policymakers can support workforce development, that policymakers can provide funding for new equipment, provide training opportunities, help support pilot projects, and address codes and standards barriers to make sure that these technologies aren't blocked. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but really the opportunity is to have policymakers support those challenges to move things along. And as Danielle said, get aligned on the policymaker goals and the needs of the supermarket industry.
Yeah. So I see, I follow the way all the phase downs and the phase outs and all, because this is happening fast. Like every year there's something new coming up, something changing, something that retailers know. What is the next couple steps that retailers should really know about policies? So, for example, in January there's a phase down of 410. So everyone knows in 410 we won't be using 410 in on new systems and things like that. What is some of the key things for regulation right now? I know it's going to be different per state, but what are some of the main things that retailers should know coming down the line?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to be aware of, starting at the federal level. And this is a rulemaking that's still in process or progress. It's not finalized yet, but just something to keep in mind that's been proposed is that starting in 2025, new systems with greater than 50 pounds of refrigerant, and this is specifically for commercial retail or food retail systems. If they have, right now it's proposed if they have greater than 200 pounds, they must be below 150 GWP. So the only alternatives right now that are, commercially available is CO2, propane, and like a low charge ammonia over CO2 system. There's other alternatives that are in the works, but in terms of what's approved, that's limited to that. So you're right. A lot of retailers are very concerned about the supply chain. Will there be enough systems that could be available at that point to meet that criteria? If it's below 200 pounds, it will need to be 300 GWP and below. So a little bit more alternatives, a little more flexibility for that less than 200 pound, but that date is coming up fast. And, there's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and then to make sure that the market is ready. If we then, zero in on a couple of states, California has already got something in place. So if you build a new system in California above 50 pounds, it's got to be less than 150 already. They've got some refrigerant bans, virgin refrigerant bans in the works. So you'll only be able to use reclaimed refrigerant. And there's a couple of dates to look at there. One trend we're seeing, and this goes to your point, Trevor, about the kind of, the refrigerant wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't leaking, right? And so some of the states are prioritizing thinking about leak rates. So New York and Washington are going to introduce similar systems that California has, a reporting mechanism, annual reporting on, not only the refrigerant and the charge, but the leak rate. Washington in particular is looking at a threshold where if you leak above a certain amount over a 12-month period and you don't repair that leak, it could trigger you to replace the system with a 150 or less. So that's a really different way of thinking about it and way more stringent than federal or California is thinking about. And, that really changes things for retailers. The other thing they're doing is they don't want to incentivize anybody to move into a midterm solution. So they're thinking about 448 and 449 as a midterm solution. It's not a long-term solution.
Yeah,
It's not going to be
totally.
viable if you follow the phase down. So what they're telling retailers to do is they would rather them stay in their high GWP refrigerant with a low leak rate, right? Or keep the leak rate under control, than move to that midterm refrigerant. And the ultimate goal in the long term is replace the equipment, but sweat the asset as long as you can, and then replace it. And that's a shift than how we've been thinking about it before.
And how's the retailers reacting to this? Like, what are they, because this is coming from regulations. What are the real retailers thinking of that at this point, like Morgan?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the retailer. So you've got the larger national chains, they're gearing up, they're getting ready. Of course, this is going to be a challenge for them, but they can't afford to not be thinking about it. If they have a large number of stores, they have to have a plan in place, especially if they have stores in those 3 states Danielle mentioned, California, Washington, and New York. I think the real challenge here is the small and independent food retailers, because in many cases, they're not even aware that this is happening. A lot of the time you have the same person managing the store and managing, making sure that the shelves are stocked as the facilities, and they depend heavily on their contractor to get the information that they need. They don't have a dedicated facilities staff. So I think getting the information out to those smaller food retailers is key, and something that we know that the policymakers are having challenges with in some cases. And then that really goes back to what I was saying earlier about making sure that there's support mechanisms in place, especially for those smaller food retailers where they may not have the capital to make that type of a transition at all. And so without some support, you could be looking at store closures. So how do we prevent that? How do we make sure they have the information and the support that they need?
Yeah, I like that. These are things that a lot of people don't think about, you know what I mean? Because regulations could start closing down small independent grocers, and we really want them to keep going. Those ones that's what makes our whole, our country's run on small businesses, you know what I mean? So we got to figure out a way definitely to help them, because I know I've talked to lots of different people throughout North America and the world, and there's still lots of people that don't understand or know that there's phase downs even happening if you're not in that world. We're in this world. We talk about this all the time, we understand, but like you said, Morgan, small independent grocer in the middle of a small town, like a village type, they wouldn't know this stuff, you know what I mean? And that may bite some independent grocers. So I love the work that you guys are doing. It's very important, and we need more of that. We need more people advocating for this, helping people understand. And I think that's the big thing. It's the knowledge, that knowledge share. And you guys do it really, really well. I'd like to get into also the work developing funding that you guys work with, because I know you guys are trying to help a lot of different people in the industry on this. Like, I know you mentioned that you do have some mechanisms in the work development funds. What's that all about?
Yeah, so there's 2 different things going on. So one, to your point about the help that a lot of the independents and smaller markets are going to need. Something that we've been working on is developing a number of funding mechanisms. So what this could look like is, incentives coming from the state or from the utility or from, we're looking at a carbon financing mechanism. And this funding would help to offset the capital cost for someone to partially or fully replace their system. And so that's something that we've been working to develop in several different ways. One is on a state level, and we've been successful there. California has just announced a $45 million program that's going to go towards replacing, existing HFC equipment. So we're, kind of in the process of working with them to determine, how that's going to look and how much funding gets allocated per project. At the same time, we've been talking with utilities Some of the ones in California are a little more forward thinking on this because of the regulatory activity there. And, utilities have always given incentives or rebates for the energy efficiency benefits. But for the first time, they've reevaluated the kind of underlying calculator of those benefits and built in a greenhouse gas metric that then translates very directly for refrigerants as it's a direct emission source. And so it's actually built into the underlying calculator. So that means that conceivably folks could get a utility rebate for the refrigerant GWP. It's great to also have, we want to see energy efficiency benefits, of course, but it could just be an incentive based on that GWP. So that's really an important thing that we're hoping to help scale up. And then I mentioned the carbon offset financing, and that has to do with there's a carbon credit associated with the refrigerant and selling the rights essentially to that carbon benefit in the volunteer market. And I know Canada has just announced a much more comprehensive program that also I think HVAC side can tap into. And so that can be really lucrative. Our vision is to actually stack all those incentives together. So you could get on one single project, state funding, utility funding, and if it makes sense for your business, the carbon financing, and really maximize the amount of funding per project. So we're in a unique position where we can kind of coordinate those pieces and bring them all together. And that's the vision we have for really helping to maximize the support for those small independent retailers.
Yeah, no, and that's interesting because I always wondering how funding would work, because if you have the small independents that have one or two store, and then you have another store and just say in state that have a 500 stores, where, how does that break up? So I'm sure it's not easy. I admit it's complex the way what you guys are doing, but it's something that is very important and what needs to be done, because that's what I really believe that happened here in Canada and Quebec. Why there's so many CO2 systems in Canada is because the government went ahead and started working with them, get that involved, and which has moved out through North America now.
And what California was looking at was modeled on that, because that program was simple, straightforward. It was like I think 150K or something really simple to anticipate, right? Right off the bat, and could be built into the project proposal, right? So that's definitely something that was looked at. A little mantra we have here is if it wasn't hard or if it was easy, then you wouldn't need us to do it. So that's kind of, we like to go and focus in on where the biggest hurdles are and put our energy and our network towards that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's very important. So these funding mechanisms that you're working on, do you guys have a timeline on releasing, or you have to wait for state funding, federal funding? How does that all work? And what's the timelines that you have to really help these end users? Because as we said, 2025 is coming very quickly.
Yeah, well, we definitely need to scale them up more. I mentioned the $45 million in California. We expect that to be available starting in maybe Q4 of this year. Wow. So we've got a few more months to work that out. There's an active program in New York. It's much smaller scale, but it's available now, and we're just waiting on the budget for it to get refunded. So sometimes it also relies on the timelines of the state and when they go through their budgetary cycles. So New York's going through that right now, but that should be really any day now. The carbon financing is available today. There's a partner we've been working with, Therm, that I'd encourage you to reach out to. They've done a really great job at sort of simplifying and streamlining that process. And there's a number of ways you can get credits. So it's not just for a natural refrigerant project. You can get credits for installing leak detection, automatic leak detection, and then also for refrigerant destruction, even the ozone depleting refrigerants. So there's a number of things that you can look at getting credits for there.
Yeah, I think that is super important. It's just to get a follow-up. This is the hard work, like for the end users, the contractors. The hard work is just putting this time in to find this stuff out. And it's good that there's a resource like you that can make it easy for people to find it, because I know a lot of this stuff is on your website. You send
Yes.
me a bunch of case studies that I'm going to put in the description. So anybody who's listened to the podcast or watching the YouTube video later, go into the description and you can get all these resources, just at least to start. Are they going to change? For sure, because this is an evolving thing. So 2 years, it's going to be a bit different as we continue to evolve, but it's so important on what both of you are doing and your team, because I know there's a lot of you that are invested, as well as all your partners that you have working for you. You have the biggest partners around the world working with you to help you, hopefully help you and assist you with this, because this is a big project for everybody, right? And it's a global project to really help our planet at the end of the day, to help our environment. Next thing I would like to talk about is like really workforce development initiatives, because I know this is something huge for both of you, is really helping contractors out there, helping technicians. Trainings are so important to you. I'd love to hear kind of what you have been. I was just at the event in California. We'll talk about that as well. But what are you guys working towards on these training initiatives going forward? Morgan, we'll start with you.
Yes. Yeah. So this all started, the service workforce readiness has always been one of our core areas of focus. But I think as the regulations advance, as the industry continues to move on this path towards getting out of HFCs, it's very clear that the biggest challenge that the industry faces is on the workforce side, and that encompasses a few different things. I think everybody's heard the term silver tsunami. Our technician workforce is largely retiring out and not re-entering at the same rate. So we have a shrinking technician workforce. With that, there's a very high demand for their time, very high demand for schedules at all hours of the day. And so that can create a lot of burnout. It also makes it very difficult to dedicate time to some of these new technologies and getting trained on them, especially if their customers aren't even moving in that direction yet. And so we kind of have this vicious cycle where we really need 3 different things to go on. We need more recruitment for technicians into the industry, number 1. Number 2, we need more training available for these technicians and easily accessible. Kudos to you, Trevor, for doing that. And then number 3, we need to improve retention. We need to make sure that once refrigeration technicians are entering this industry, they're not leaving for something else. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. We started with an assessment last year just to collect some data and put some data behind what we had been hearing anecdotally for years. So that really gave us a good foundation to have data-driven solutions, make sure we're taking an informed approach to this. So we actually released a report for that in January. That's available on our website, and it's included in the links that Trevor will include with the podcast and YouTube video. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And I'm sure Danielle has some things she'd like to add to that because it's such a big program.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really said it, and it's amazing because, we, like I said, we play this translator role with policymakers and they see numbers, right? So we got to get to this certain number. We got to get to this phase down. At the end of the day, it's people that are going to make this happen. And so I think the realization we had, that we'd been hearing for so long, that there was this shortage and we thought, oh, someone else is taking care of that, right? And it's not to say people are working very hard on this issue. The key thing that was missing is kind of this platform to amplify and align those efforts so that we're all pointed in the same direction, right? We've all got the same goal and we can work together on these things, because it will take effort comprehensively from the entire industry to work on this. And support the people who are going to make this happen, right? It's not going to happen without them. And so I think once we realized that, we kind of turned everything around within our organization and made this our top focus, because without this, none of the other stuff happens, right? And we don't get to that goal. Nobody hits their climate goals. The phase down doesn't happen without people. So it's really become our number 1 priority.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think this is not something new to. I've been in the industry over 20 years, and I've heard it 20 years ago. We need more people in the industry. We need to train more people. People are leaving, and less people are coming in. So it's not new, but it's something that's talked about more and more, which is good. It's how do we work as a team to do it? And I think that's one of the things that's not happening in the industry, because we're still getting most of the work done. I talked to contractors. Yes, every contractor I talk to, probably globally, they're like, I wish I had another 1, 2, 3, or 4 guys, or technicians, or people to help in refrigeration, what refrigeration knows. But the thing is, I think we do need to figure out how to work more together, like you're saying, from manufacturers to contractors to end users, and streamline a lot of stuff. I see a lot of pressure being put on like trade schools and colleges, but they only can do so much. It comes back to contractors, end users, and manufacturers all working together to figure this out. If we want I believe if we want refrigeration to continue to grow, we got to work together and break out of these silos that we've been in for so long, where we're working independently, trying to do the same thing. Working together, even if you're a competitor to each other, is better than working alone, because it put a huge damper on our industry for the last 20 some years.
And we have a great precedent for that. I mean, so we have monthly call with our retailers where, competitors all get on the same call and exchange information and tips, and, oh, you got that, how much, what are you doing for this? And it's a beautiful thing, right? They don't, in that moment, they're not seeing each other as competitors. We're all in this together. We all need to share information to move it all forward. And you saw at our event too. I mean, the energy there, and just the amount of different folks working together that don't normally ever get to see each other. I mean, I can't tell you how many of the other trainers said, I've never seen anybody else do training, or never had the chance to attend other trainings like yours. So it was a good thing.
Yeah, no, and that's really good. Let's talk about that event too, because that event just doesn't happen overnight. This was a big event that they did in Irwindale, California, and you did it at the Southern Edison Conference Center.
Yeah, so we'd had a relationship with the big utility there, Southern California Edison, and they'd hosted us before. We did an event that was focused on the intersection of energy efficiency and low GWP. So, what could we do to, the word they use is decarbonize, but they're looking at, how to make their buildings the most energy efficient and the lowest GWP possible. So we'd had a precedent for using that wonderful space, the training center that they have there. And when we pitched them this idea, it was really off the cuff, and it was having to do with the fact that they wanted to, they were really interested in what they could contribute to workforce development and training. And they were trying and have been doing these one-off webinars. But we said, you really got to get everybody in person. And, what we could maybe do is, there's this precedent for, if you want to go get Hill Phoenix training, okay, you sign up for a 3-day Hill Phoenix training, you want to go for Danfoss training, okay, that's separate. What if we could bring them all in one place, right? And offer all of these trainings in a variety of rooms, variety of options, across a 2.5-day schedule. How many more technicians could we get trained up that way? Right. And they were, I guess, crazy enough to say, hey, that sounds like an idea. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. And so the whole thing was just a huge experiment. Somewhere along the line, we got the idea that we should bring in the students from the local HVAC&R programs, get them connected with the industry, make sure that when they graduate, they choose the R, right? Nothing against the AC side, but we need more of that 100%. R, right?
I'm totally on your side with that.
Yeah, but we need more of the R. So how can we facilitate that? And so what came together was this event that, included 12 different training organizations. We had 17 sessions that repeated throughout a schedule of 2.5 days. So if you missed, one session, you could find it at another time. Over 250 technicians attended. We had 350 total attendees, and an exhibit, kind of networking session with the students. So it turned out, I mean, from our side, we just heard so much positive feedback about the whole thing. 100% of the technicians said that, their knowledge of CO2 increased either significantly, which was part of the goal there. And so, yeah, we're looking to repeat the same formula and bring it to other locations.
I love it. Morgan, what was some of the highlights for you? Because I know this is a big event. What were a couple of the highlights for this? And I'll talk about some of my highlights as well.
Yeah, I gotta say the student networking was the number one highlight for me. It was so awesome to see almost 100 students and faculty from local HVACR programs coming in, networking with the industry. The energy in the room was so intense. Everybody was so excited. There was just a buzz that I think carried on then throughout the rest of the event. It was cool to see students coming in some cases a little bit unsure of what they were walking into, and walking out saying, this is so cool, I connected with employers. We also had a student survey, and the students all indicated a much higher likelihood of entering a career in refrigeration afterwards. So it was just a really overwhelmingly positive and rewarding part of the event, and something we've never done before, that's bringing the students in like that. So seeing the success there, we know it's something we're going to replicate many times over in other parts of the country, and use that as a recruitment tool to try to get more technicians into the industry.
Yeah, no, I think that is great. What I loved about it was just having a lot of passionate people who care about the industry there. And that's what it was like. From the manufacturers to the end users, to the different associations even being there and wanting to be there. You know what I mean? All the technicians that I talked to wanted to be there and weren't forced by their companies to go to these trainings. Like there's lots of trainings out there where people just have to go and take, but there were so many people that are passionate about it, and all the trainers, they want to share their knowledge. They want to help the industry grow. And I totally enjoyed talking to a lot of the students too, just to give them a better understanding of what's out there, the opportunity, especially in refrigeration, because there's so many opportunities in what we do. It's amazing. And I'm excited that you guys want to do another event. I've heard it from countless people where they were like, I mean, we would love another one of these events. And I've talked to so many people who didn't make it, who were very jealous that they couldn't make it, right?
FOMO, I think is the word.
Well, they did miss out. They did miss out because it was an amazing event, because I learned a ton myself. I do CO2. I've been training CO2 for years and years. Talk about it for a year now, just on here. And I've learned a ton while I was there. Once again, it was the networking for me. That's what I love doing, building relationships with people that I meet on, I meet a couple of times at different events, but that's what you got to do. Build these relationships, network with new people. How do you work together to grow yourself as well as the people around you, which is so cool. What about you, Danielle? What was your highlight of the event for you?
There was a gentleman that came up to me that said, I bet someday we'll look back on this event and say that it was the turning point for CO2. And that was just like, I mean, we got, like Morgan said, the energy, the passionate trainers, just all of those folks there. But just hearing that, really, I guess it gave me like perspective on the fact that, like, we talk about CO2, we talk about natural refrigerants all the time, right? But the reality is, out in the field, 90% or 98% of what's out there is in the US is still HFC based, right? But being able to see that turning point and see that, happen, that would be amazing, right? So that's what we're going for here. And so, yeah, there's the value of being in person. It's so great that we can do this again. When we did this last event with SE, it was pre-COVID, right? So it's like, I feel like we're back now, and we can start to really do more of these and scale up, and along the way, building the network, right? And bringing in more partners. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here. If there's folks that are doing elements of workforce development that are working well, we want to bring them into the fold, right? We're not trying to replicate what they're doing necessarily. It's all about partnerships.
Yeah, I love that. And it's important. We need more people to educate, share knowledge, learn, grow, because that's what it's all about. And I really appreciate everything that both of you are doing and your teams are doing. Any final thoughts? Anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
I would just put it out there that if you have feedback, feel free to reach out. We are listening. I mean, that's how we operate, right? Someone has a crazy idea. We're like, let's try it and, get people on board. This is how things happen. So definitely speak up and, sign up for our newsletter too, if you want to continue to get these updates and hear about the, next training event.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll just put in a shameless plug that as all of these requests to repeat this event in location after location after location are rolling in, the key thing we need is a facility and a partner that's willing to host us. So we're putting feelers out. If you would like us to come to your area, any suggestions on partners that may have a facility we could utilize for this event, the way that Southern California Edison did, would be greatly appreciated. And again, echoing Danielle's sentiments, we're here to listen. So please feel free to share your feedback and suggestions at any time.
I love it. I love it so much. So how can people get a hold of you, get a hold of your organization if they want to get in touch maybe with this stuff so they can contact you?
Yeah, so I'll put oh, go ahead, Morgan.
There you go. I think Danielle's writing it. I'll say it. Our website is our acronym NASRC.org. So you can find us on there, and you can contact us at info@nasrc.org at any time.
I love that. This will all be in the descriptions. Like, reach out to this organization. They got a ton of trainings on there from a ton of different manufacturers already. There's lots of learning resources, reports, things that's going to really help you grow your knowledge. Everything that you read and you learn about it's all helpful to growing your refrigeration knowledge, especially CO2 knowledge, because that's what I'm all about. I want to thank both of you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with me on the Refrigeration Mentor podcast and CO2 Mondays. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll see you all at the next CO2 Monday. See you later.
Thank you, Trevor.
Hey, thank you for watching this video. I do hope it is bringing you a lot of value. If you are looking to grow and build your refrigeration teams and want them to learn CO2 refrigeration, head to the refrigerationmentor.com website, click to contact us, and let us know how we can build a culture around training inside your organization. Let's get a conversation going.